So it's important to realize that in the 21st century, stress and worry come from very different things than they did thousands of years ago. Back then, stress came from being in physical danger, and in that environment, insomnia kept you alive, right? Because you're not falling asleep and getting picked off. So today, stress comes actually more from the way we talk to ourselves and the consequences of not getting enough sleep.
James Cahoon is a former insomniac who has cured his own insomnia. He is not a doctor, nor is he a licensed practitioner of medicine. The material in this video is meant for informational purposes only. Consult your physician before making any decisions based upon this material.
So in this video, we're going to get into the fundamentals of self-therapy. So previously, we looked at the basic qualities of self-therapy and basically looked at how it's more of an environment or a way of being than it is a technique itself. So in other words, it's more of the context or the stage that you set in which everything happens. So now that you know what the self-therapeutic method is and kind of like the overview, the general idea of it, now we're going to actually get in really to start learning how to use it a little bit more. And these are going to be the three fundamental elements that you would do to generate a self-therapeutic environment. So these three elements are compassion, relation to community, and mindfulness. And in this video, we're going to cover these from sort of a kind of a summary of them. So we're going to kind of cover them in just the basics of it. And then in future videos, we're actually going to get more in depth into each one. So to start with compassion essentially refers to being gentle, kind, and understanding rather than being critical and judgmental. So compassion serves two purposes. The first is that it counteracts the kind of self-talk that keeps you awake. So it's important to realize that in the 21st century, stress and worry come from very different things than they did thousands of years ago. Back then, stress came from being in physical danger, and in that environment, insomnia kept you alive, right? Because you're not falling asleep and getting picked off. So today, stress comes actually more from the way we talk to ourselves and the consequences of not getting enough sleep. But our subconscious mind doesn't really care about how the stress comes about. And the way to stop the stress that we create today is by speaking to ourselves in a different way. And actually, in essence, the opposite way that you probably have been in a lot of different areas. So if your current thoughts are keeping you awake, then the opposing way of thinking will prevent you from keeping yourself awake, if that makes sense. So current thoughts are making you stay awake, and you have to essentially stop that or you're not going to fall asleep. So the other purpose of compassion is that it creates the thoughts and feelings that actually generate sleep. So as opposed to the one we just talked about, where you're generating thoughts and feelings that are preventing sleep, essentially anti-sleep, then the other side of compassion is that it actually generates feelings and thoughts that create sleep or are pro-sleep, right? So 10,000 years ago, sleep happened when you felt safe. But the thoughts and feelings that generate sleep aren't just that simple as like generating a feeling of like safety itself. There's actually feelings and thoughts that come along with safety that are going to be the ones that actually induce sleep. And you can obtain those thoughts and feelings in multiple ways. So like the whole game has changed. So if if you think about that logically, if you're no longer in danger, then physical danger, then getting physically safe isn't going to make a difference because you're not in physical danger. You're just feeling a stress, right? So there's other feelings and thoughts that came along with safety that are now not present because of this different way that you're feeling stress. and you can generate those feelings that would have come along with safety. So what kind of feelings are those? Well, some examples. The biggest one is feeling, especially loved. So if you have, someone that really is important to you, and you just are full of that feeling of love, that's going to be one of those feelings that would generate. It would be pro sleep essentially. There's other feelings like a strong feeling of relief, such as going on your dream vacation. That would you'd find that if you had really bad insomnia, a lot of people that go on a really like amazing vacation, magically their insomnia is kind of gone for that week. And obviously another thing that can cause those sleep-inducing feelings is compassion. So that's why we're going into it. And in line with self-therapy, you can learn self-compassion. So you can actually create this special, almost magical sleep-inducing comfort for yourself. On one hand, self-compassion is harder than compassion because most people are much harder on themselves than they are on others. And you might view it as sort of being a self-pity or self-indulging kind of thing. And if that's kind of like where you're at, where you're like, I don't know about this self-compassion thing, well, this might be a little bit more difficult for you because that's something that you cannot do. That's actually self-critical, and it's actually essentially judgmental to be like, this kind of feels like hokey, like self-indulging kind of stuff. Well, that's a judgy kind of vibe that's going to be counteractive to sleep. So that's something that you have to let go of when we go through this a little bit more in future videos. Now, on the other hand, you do have a major advantage because there's not as much guesswork as to what you're experiencing. So when we, essentially just kind of get rid of this inner critic that's going on, you're going to stop keeping yourself awake. And with the growth of your self-compassion, you're going to be able to create an environment that causes any sleep remedy to work much faster, easier, and that creates much deeper sleep. All right, so moving on to the second fundamental element of the self-therapeutic method and going to relation to community. So this refers to how related you feel to the people that make up the insomnia community at large, rather than feeling alienated by your suffering. Now, when I say insomnia community at large, all I really mean is, do you feel like you're normal and this is kind of a regular thing and that there's a lot of other people dealing with that? Or do you feel totally unique and alone and like your insomnia problem is different from everyone else and there's nothing you can do about it? So when we look at relation to community and why that's important, why that's kind of a weirder way of saying things, well, just look at, again, going back to our roots, when we were essentially cavemen 10,000 years ago, there was safety in numbers. We actually grew up in packs, right? So if you were alone and you were vulnerable, then, that would be a major factor in your safety, which of course would be a major factor in your ability to sleep. So obviously today we have homes that protect us quite well from the elements. But if you feel alone, perhaps because of that unique and different insomnia problem and you're not like everyone else, then your subconscious mind will still interpret that as a vulnerability, and that's a major trigger for insomnia. So while it can certainly help to go talk to other insomniacs, really what we're referring here is how you relate to yourself. So do you feel like you're a lone wolf? Or do you feel like you're just like the other many insomniacs who are going through the same thing that you are? So when you look at self-therapy and therapy and look at like the professionals, a therapist, they get to know people's most private inner workings because they have many patients and they have a good sense of how most people are essentially the same. So they get to see everyone kind of feeling or experiencing the same feelings, emotions, and so on. And so they get to see where we're all sort of, see what we all have in common and sort of they understand where you fit into that. But as an insomniac, you feel different and isolated. And so this is one of the largest challenges to guiding yourself properly. And the thing to realize right now, and obviously we're going to get into this more in future videos, but the fact is you're not alone. And if you relate to your struggles as being normal and something that you have in common with millions of other insomniacs, you can start feeling connected to this common experience, and that's actually going to generate a sense of safety and comfort and the type of feelings that generate sleep. So moving on to the third and final fundamental element of the self-therapeutic method, mindfulness. Well, if you aren't already familiar with mindfulness, this essentially refers to holding your experience or your focus in sort of a balanced awareness. So you're not ignoring pain and you're not exaggerating it. At least when we talk about mindfulness in relation to sleep. So if you've ever been to therapy, then you know that's a safe place where you can share your most painful experiences in life with obviously professional guidance. So when you do that, you not only you have to sort of experience what you're afraid of, but it's often the anticipation of experiencing this pain that's actually the worst part, not the actual pain itself. So I'm building to a point here, but just think about that for a second. Have you ever been afraid of sort of an upcoming experience, but then found that it wasn't so bad when you actually went through the experience? I mean, you can actually pause if you want to get a little bit more connected to that. But insomnia feeds on our anticipations. So stress comes not from the pain, but the worry. Worry about struggling at night. Worry about exhaustion the next day. Worry about our health and our livelihood. So mindfulness allows you to deal with both the worry itself and the pain that you're actually worried about. It allows you to sort of embrace and absorb these thoughts and feelings of worry and anticipation, to accept them as thoughts and feelings, which you can just sort of watch and experience as they sort of rise in and fade out of your awareness without feeding into the obsessiveness of all of that. Normally we're sort of running on autopilot, and mindfulness allows you to sort of step out of that autopilot and just sort of accept things and neutralize them. So it allows you to experience pain without trying to avoid it, which actually ends up reducing and absorbing the impact that pain would have had, or the significance it would have had. And it's really the urge to avoid pain that is what makes it so painful in the first place. So when you stop amplifying your pain by trying to avoid it and fix it, it's less painful. And when something is less painful, you're not going to worry so much about it. So in this way, mindfulness can greatly reduce the impact that insomnia is able to have on you by essentially getting to the root causes of your insomnia, just by directly being able to absorb and neutralize some of the things that are going on. So mindfulness is just about accepting things as they are. A therapist naturally has sort of a third-party perspective, so they can accept things with ease, and they can attempt to guide their patient through an experience. So as a self-therapist, your advantage is that you're able to witness your own experience much more directly. But your disadvantage is that the first-person perspective that comes along with it really means that you are mostly just kind of going along with the flow, that you're not actually in the driver's seat a lot of the time. So I guess another way of saying is being in it means that you have very little leverage over it. Now with mindfulness, you can actually obtain the best of both of these worlds. So you can have that first person viewpoint, but you can simply witness things as they are, as if you were in a third person perspective. So you can witness your reactions instead of being driven by them. You can choose to create the space needed for a safe, comfortable approach to the sleep technique or remedy of your choosing. Okay, so we're going to get more into mindfulness and the other two elements in future videos. But for now, if you want to keep practicing, I've got a simple exercise for you to try out before the next video. It's actually kind of fun because it's a great way to feel better when you're not feeling so hot. So in the last self-therapeutic method video, the exercise was actually around compassion. That's where you practice talking to yourself like a good friend, which I'm sure you totally did that, right? Well, hopefully you're doing the exercises, but if not, don't worry. Some people don't necessarily like compassion at first. It takes a little bit of time for that to work into some people, and it takes time to understand why it's so critical. But we're going to get more into that in future videos. But for this next video, we're actually going to get into mindfulness. So this exercise is actually going to get you started on that before the video. And it's super simple. All you have to do is pick something that gave you grief today or this week, where you're sort of kind of struggling a little bit emotionally. And you're going to spend about 5 minutes paying attention to that emotional pain point. So wherever the thing you're resisting, or the thing that was the painful part of it, you're just going to basically spend 5 minutes paying close attention to that. And that's actually a really simple meditation, but it can be extraordinarily insightful. So next week, we're going to discover that our struggling and suffering isn't a result of pain, but rather it's a result of resistance. Kind of like we started getting into with this video, we're actually going to really kind of get to see that a little bit more and really discover it. So you're going to discover that more for yourself. And this exercise is a really important part of being able to sort of discover that for yourself. So just to give you an example of that right now, just think of any time that you were in pain but didn't really care that you were in pain. So in fact, there's actually been times in your life where you've been in pain and it hasn't been such a big deal. In fact, there might have even been times where you actually kind of liked a little bit of pain. So that's actually kind of common for people who push themselves hard at the gym, or even at work, in your career. There's a lot of people that have sort of pushed themselves to that point where they actually enjoyed the pushing, and the pain, the thing that was painful, actually kind of flips on its head a little bit. But you'll notice in those times there's no resistance there. When you resist pain, that is to say, when you don't want it or you want to stop, it gets much, much worse. So this exercise is to relive a moment of emotional pain. So just remember the time, remember where you were, what happened, and see if you can sort of recall the pain in your mind. So not just remembering it, but really like kind of reliving it a little bit, recalling it. So it might take a minute of thinking about it to feel it. That might actually take a couple minutes to really get into it. And once you've experienced the pain again, set a 5-minute timer and spend the whole 5 minutes focusing on nothing but that experience of pain. So you might drift a little bit, but if your focus drifts, you bring it back. So it's actually a little meditation. So you're going to accept it, explore what it feels like, and embrace the feeling. And at first, it might get worse. That's actually a normal part of it. And if that happens, just stay focused on the feeling and try not to think about anything else. If you're able to hone your entire focus on the pain for more than a couple minutes, you'll typically notice that it disappears. So if you try this and it doesn't work, don't worry. We're going to get more into the elements of mindfulness in the next video. But the next video will be much more valuable for you if you get to experience the power of mindfulness prior to learning more about it. And you'll really be learning the information with a first-hand experience of it. So this is a really important exercise to get the most out of the next video. So just give it a try. So thanks again for watching this video, and please remember I am just getting started here, so I need all the help I can get. If you're getting value out of this, please like the video and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.